Hi, welcome to Asian American Life. I'm your host, Ernabel Demillo. In this episode, we'll trace the roots of your favorite Chinese dishes, plus take a look at the hottest Asian American food trends across the country. And what better way to celebrate Asian food history than right here at the Museum of Food and Drink, also known as Mofaz in Brooklyn. We'll take a tour of their latest exhibit, but first, here's what's ahead on our show. Oodles of noodles, Paul Lin explains why ramen is one of the world's top comfort food. Minnie Rowe tells the untold story of the Chinese restaurant boom in America. Adobo, lechon, and pancit. I discover why Filipino food is taking the culinary world by storm. Move over sriracha. Minnie Rowe reports on why kimchi's become the hottest food trend. This and more on Asian American Life. Mofaz Exhibit Chow, Making the Chinese American Restaurant, traces the history of one of the most popular cuisines in America. Peter Kim, the executive director of Mofaz, gave me a tour of this multi-sensory exhibit.
Chow, Making the Chinese American Restaurant, tells an extraordinary story of hardship, adaptation, and entrepreneurship behind the making of Chinese American restaurants that you can find in nearly every corner of the country. There's nearly a 170-year history behind these restaurants, and it actually starts in the 19th century when the Chinese came as laborers for the gold rush and then building the railroad. There was actually a backlash against the Chinese immigrant population where a lot of Americans felt they didn't belong in the country. The Chinese who were in the US suffered quite a bit, and they had no economic opportunities, so they turned to opening their own businesses, including restaurants, to market their food toward non-Chinese diners. And this led to the beginning of the development of what we know today as the Chinese American restaurant. You started to see influences from Hunan and Sichuan and other parts of China come into the menu. The Chinese restaurant owners adapted the ingredients and the flavors for the American palate. At Mofaz, we like to take a multi-sensory and multidisciplinary approach. So when you first come into Chow, you can visually immerse yourself in the timeline of menus from 1910 to 2016. And you can see through the menu the evolution of the cuisine. The fortune cookie is a beloved part of the Chinese American restaurant. We actually have a fully operational and working fortune cookie machine. It is a smaller scale version of the first fully automated fortune cookie machine, which was invented in the early 1980s by a Korean American inventor. You smell the smell of freshly baked fortune cookies in the air, and then the cookies march along on a conveyor belt, and visitors can pluck as many cookies as they want and eat them. The capstone of the exhibition is the Chow Culinary Studio, where we actually are cooking dishes for visitors that highlight different culinary techniques of the Chinese American restaurant. Every month we're featuring a different recipe that was designed by one of the top Chinese American chefs. We have a wok station, and you'll be able to see that dish being created before your eyes and then actually taste it.
You can learn more about this exhibit and all our stories by visiting us on Facebook at Asian American Life. Now here's more.
I'm Paul Lin. It's arguably one of the world's best-loved comfort foods, the noodle soup called ramen. Enormously popular in Japan, ramen shops have been gaining ground all across the U.S., including right here in New York City.
In this city, if it's good, people will wait. And they're waiting for ramen. To learn why there's such a healthy appetite for the steaming hot bowl of noodle soup, we head over to Ramen Lab to speak with third-generation noodle maker Kenshiro Uki. His family's company, Sun Noodle, is a leading maker of fresh noodles. Ken calls ramen very delicious, very filling, and affordable. A food for the people.
Everyday food that people can consume, whether you're rich, poor, a college student, ramen is just very approachable to eat.
Not that it's a simple matter. There's plenty of options to choose from.
The most popular ramen in New York is tonkotsu, or it's pork broth. Both shoyu, miso, and shio are maybe the main four available in Japan, but within the four, there's a bunch of other styles from those prefectures.
You'll find them and many other regional styles from around the world right here, as chefs travel to Ramen Lab to show how they do ramen, like Chef Kaide visiting from Honolulu. He does what's called atsukamen at Menya Musashi.
Broth and noodles are separated, and you dip the noodles in the broth. It's a more concentrated broth, and it's thicker noodles. and so we call that tsukemen. Tsuke means to dip, and men is noodles.
It should be pretty clear that these are not the instant noodles consumed in college dorms and worldwide with over 100 billion served. The term Ken uses here, craft ramen.
We try to break it down to 5 different elements. We call it the 5 elements of ramen. Obviously, number 1 for us is the noodles.
Freshly made wheat flour noodles with a healthy chew from what's called kansi, an alkaline solution that brings ramen noodles their distinctive color, taste, and texture. Broth boiled down for hours. The tare, or concentrated seasoning. Aromatic oils. And unique toppings. Ramen Lab started in 2013 as Sun Noodle's R&D tasting kitchen in New Jersey. The factory Ken had only just opened the year before, building up a loyal base on the East Coast. The Teterboro factory produces 60,000 servings of fresh artisan noodles each day. In the busy cooler months, it runs 6 days a week to meet demand, making hundreds of varieties for top shops. Sun Noodle began 35 years ago with Ken's grandfather in Tochigi, Japan. He had a venture in Hawaii to make noodles there, but when that deal fell through, Ken's father accepted the equipment and signed on to a career as a noodle maker.
And so at 19, he just said, okay, let me go to Hawaii, let me just start this business. And that's where Sun Noodle was established in 1981.
Ken's parents got the kids on board with the family business right from the start.
Sundays were the days where we would go out as a family to a ramen shop to eat, because that way my father could get work done, talk to the customer, and also feed us.
Later, Ken worked at the original factory before moving on to California to run Sun Noodle's facility there, which turns out about 70,000 noodle servings a day. In Hawaii, it's more like 90,000. These factories supply surging demand for fresh ramen from many hundreds of shops in the U.S. A recent travel and leisure slideshow featured ramen shops in Louisiana, Colorado, and Minnesota, even Texas.
There's a ramen shop out there that does a brisket ramen, and it's very well received in Texas.
Ramen, historians believe, came to Japan from China. The word comes from the Chinese la, to pull, and mian, noodle. Exactly when it became ramen has been disputed, but some say the noodle soup debuted in Japan in the 17th century. A powerful lord may have been the first from Japan to dine on ramen. The dish became popular in restaurants by the early 20th century, followed by the invention of instant noodles in 1958 by the famous Momofuku Ando. His cup noodle came to the U.S. in the 1970s, and that's how America learned to love ramen as an instant noodle.
Here in the U.S., a lot of people started with the instant ramen, and now you see a trend towards what I guess you could say fresh ramen or craft ramen is.
The appreciation of ramen has become almost cult-like in parts of the U.S., decades after the ramen boom in Japan, which has tens of thousands of ramen shops and 3 ramen museums. In 1985, the comedy Tampopo, styled after the spaghetti western, showed just how serious people can be about their ramen. Ken says it's fine to appreciate the ramen however you like, but when the bowl is set in front of you, it's the perfect time to eat. Don't wait.
For the chef, I think the most happy moment for them is when they serve that bowl of ramen and your whole attention is just to enjoy the soup and noodles.
It's an experience Sun Noodle bets more people want. In early 2017, it's opening a new factory in nearby Carlstadt, New Jersey, producing some 250,000 servings of fresh noodles a day, roughly doubling the company's total output. Ken believes the market can support it.
Ramen and the ramen culture itself is still growing, and there's I think a lot of people who are still wanting for that ramen shop to come to their city in the U.S.
You never know what chef you'll find cooking specials here at Ramen Lab. Check out the website and social media for the latest. I'm Paul Lin for Asian American Life.
I'm Minnie Rowe. You may know the saying, there's a Chinese restaurant on every street corner. But what you may not know is that this proliferation can actually be traced back to one significant moment during a historical event.
I love General Tso's chicken. It's always my go-to Chinese dish.
In any corner of any town in America, you are sure to find at least one Chinese restaurant.
My favorite Chinese dish is chicken and broccoli, egg rolls, and egg foo young.
But have you ever wondered why there are so many Chinese restaurants in the United States?
Americans love Chinese food, and it's so good.
People think that it's because Chinese food tastes so good, and I would say Chinese restaurateurs are not going to shy away from that kind of claim as the reason why there are so many restaurants.
Heather Lee is a historian and scholar from MIT and has written a book about the boom of Chinese restaurants in America.
The basic explanation is Chinese food tastes good, it's cheap, it's convenient, they're everywhere. They're open late hours. It's really sort of a convenience food that hits all the sort of the sweet spots of economic.
But Lee says the real truth about how and why Chinese food spread so far and wide is far more complex. And it's a fascinating glimpse into a chapter of American history which, to date, remains a sore spot for many Chinese Americans.
The anti-Chinese movement, which pushed from a local and then state level to a federal level movement and had support very broadly across the nation. And they've helped pass the first federal immigration laws called the Chinese Exclusion Acts in 1882. And that really set the stage for both Chinese immigration, the way that immigrants come into this country.
The Chinese began arriving en masse in this country during the California Gold Rush around 1850 and to work on the first transcontinental railroad. But in the late 1800s, the U.S. was hit with a depression, and animosity towards foreigners, particularly the Chinese, increased. The Chinese Exclusion Act was an attempt to shut the borders to Chinese laborers. Restaurant owners fell under this category at that time. Only non-laborers, such as merchants, teachers, students, and tourists, were allowed a special exemption to enter the country to foster trade. Then, in 1915,
there was a New York court case that ruled, well, Chinese restaurants are, can be pretty big businesses, they seem pretty legitimate, and we would define them as merchants. And voila, you have the Chinese suddenly having a new way to get into the country.
And this was the smoking gun that Lee realized explained the origin of the Chinese restaurant boom in the United States.
When I read that, I realized that the Chinese then were suddenly opening restaurants in order to take advantage of this loophole. So started counting, started quantifying.
Her research found that at the turn of the century, there were only about 20 Chinese restaurants in New York, all of them in Chinatown. By 1918, a police census found there were about 350 restaurants. And then the number expanded again to about 500 by 1930, based on licensing information.
They formed restaurants as a partnership. You would take on different duties. One person would be an accountant, one person would be a cook, one person would be the manager, et cetera, et cetera. But where there still wasn't enough capital amongst these 4 or 5 people, so you would sell stocks. The Chinese were very quick to sort of use a corporate model to capitalize their restaurants.
Immigration brokers helped them navigate the system, offering advice on everything from how to open a restaurant with limited capital to answering immigration authorities' questions when they came knocking on the door. These merchants also needed witnesses to complete the application. They quickly forged a quid pro quo agreement with local vendors.
You have grocers really dominating the number of witnesses in this time period, but also in particular the employees of a business called John Randall's Co. and Company, which was a grocer that dates all the way from, I think, 1887 was when it formed. So they appear over and over as witnesses.
The loophole may have been the impetus, but it takes a lot more than that to create a boom. Lee surmises that it was the perfect combination of the culture of the times, the roaring 20s and 30s when dining out was all the rage, coupled with the affordability of Chinese food.
There's a bygone era of dining out that was very particular to the big cities, in New York especially. In the 10s and 20s, it was very popular to go out for a meal and also to hear live entertainment and dance throughout the night. And these were called cabarets, and chop suey palaces were a version of that. So Chinese restaurants made it then affordable to people who wanted to participate in this glamorous nightlife.
The most famous of these so-called chop suey palaces was Chin Lee's in Times Square, which could seat up to 1,500 people.
These were very, very expensive establishments. They took about $90,000 to $150,000 to capitalize, so that's roughly about $2 million today. So it was a lot of money for, people to raise.
So, ironically, the very law that was supposed to keep Chinese out of America actually fueled the immense rise of Chinese restaurants. On a personal note, Lee says this is an important legacy for all children of immigrants like herself. Her parents came to the U.S. as students and worked in restaurants to make ends meet.
It was also a very common path for Chinese professionals who couldn't get jobs as the engineers that they were trained to do, or chemists or physicists to work in a Chinese restaurant. Also, there's some sort of lack of economic mobility that Chinese restaurants offer for people who don't have options, even to this day.
The Chinese restaurant boom spread in later years to other parts of the country: Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle. And the rest, as they say, is history. I'm Minnie Rowe for Asian American Life.
Filipino food is taking off across the country. After years of taking a backseat to other Asian cuisine, Filipino restaurants are making their way to the top of the food critics list.
Filipino food is crispy, salty.
It's Asian, it's Latin.
It began with a dream and a Kickstarter video. Today, Bad Saint in Washington, D.C. has 4-hour wait times and was named the second best new restaurant in the U.S. by Bon Appetit magazine. Meanwhile, in New York, so Condé Nast just recently named Maharlika one of the best restaurants in the world.
In the world! I don't even know how we got that. It's a little crazy.
Yes, folks, Filipino cuisine has arrived, and some are wondering what took so long.
I don't think we were ever raised to be entrepreneurs. I don't think we were raised to actually think that owning a restaurant was a viable option. I think we were raised to be doctors, lawyers, accountants, the jobs that, one, are risk averse because our parents take the biggest risk coming here.
But the second generation of Filipino Americans are starting to take that risk. Nicole Ponseca, founder and owner of Maharlika and Nearby Jeepney, is often credited for being the pioneer of what many call the Filipino food movement.
The Filipino food movement is a group of Filipinos, typically second gen, and we can either be restaurateurs, business people, chefs, or just out-and-out fans. And in that regard, it even extends outside of being, Filipino heritage. But it is a fast-growing group of like-minded people that want to see our food progress, be enjoyed by more, and have a seat at the culinary table.
So pull up a seat at this culinary table where innovative young chefs take traditional Filipino cuisine like adobo, kare-kare, sisig to the next level. And yes, there have always been neighborhood Filipino restaurants, mostly quaint mom-and-pop cafes known as turo-turo spots, which literally means point because you pointed at the food you wanted. And there was the now shuttered Cendrillon in Soho. Owners Emmy Besa and Romy Doratan, credited for bringing Filipino food to the masses, now run Purple Yam in Brooklyn. But it wasn't until Maharlika opened in 2011 when Filipino food became a destination spot for foodies, not just comfort food for those missing a home-cooked meal. For Ponseca, the restaurant business was an accidental detour of sorts.
Being a restaurateur, no, that was never part of the plan. I came to New York and I thought I was going to be the next Donnie Deutsch or Goodby Silverstein. I thought I was going to be Don Draper. I wanted to pursue advertising, and that was what I was doing. I started at Saatchi & Saatchi, and I realized early on that we lacked representation in the food world.
Fonseca didn't have any restaurant experience, so she started at the bottom.
I wanted to take it even one step further, but I'd never worked in a restaurant, and I was scared of failure, and of course I didn't want my parents to freak out. So I moonlighted for 12 years, and by day I was an ad exec, and then at night I started off as a dishwasher and then a host. I bartended, I served, all while having my day job.
She started out with weekend-only pop-ups, one of the first in the city, and drew big crowds and praise from critics. In 2011, she and her partners opened Maharlika in the East Village. When they opened, New York Times food critic Ligaya Mishkin praised the authentic food and wrote, quote, "Could it be that Filipino food, the underdog of Asian cuisines, is having its moment at last?" Mishkin was right. It was the beginning of a movement. Along with Fonseca's Maharlika and now Jeepney, there's Purple Yam, Manila Social, Ugly Kitchen, Bad Saint, and Purple Patch. And the list continues to grow around the country and internationally. Bloomberg News called Le Servan one of the best bistros in Paris, run by French-Filipina sisters Tatiana and Katia Levha. There are also websites like Filipino Kitchen, whose mission is to raise the profile of Philippine cuisine. Their Instagram feed is filled with mouth-watering Filipino food crafted by Filipino chefs from around the world. And if you don't have a Filipino restaurant near you, just wait. Yana Gilbuana may be coming to your town next with her Salo series.
So the Salo series is a movable Filipino pop-up dinner. So basically the whole mission is to bring Filipino food to, at first it was the 50 states, and then now it's kind of evolved into doing it to the 7 continents, if I can do it.
We managed to catch up with her in San Francisco via Skype.
I was kind of in my apartment in Brooklyn, and it was like the dead of winter, and I really wanted arroz caldo. And it was one of those things that was just like very comforting. And I was so frustrated because I couldn't even order it on Seamless. And I was like, why is this happening? You know, we're in New York, and this is like the mecca of all the melting pots of cultures. And I don't understand why I can't get something from my country, you know? And that kind of made me think like how there was still not enough awareness about Filipino cuisine and how all the other Asian cuisines have made it.
So the Traveling Salo series was born, and it looks like Filipino cuisine is here to stay.
We have influences from India, from the Arabs, we have influences from the Malays, the Chinese, and then even Portuguese who came by. And then we have obviously Spanish because they were the ones who stayed longest. And now we have the Americans. So our food is like that perfect like fusion. And I hate to say that word fusion, but it is, because we have adapted all these, you know, like influences and made it our own.
I'm Ernabel Demillo for Asian American Life.
I'm Minnie Rowe. A Korean meal without kimchi is like having an Italian feast without pasta. This national dish of Korea was until recently known to the world as that stinky, spicy, garlicky cabbage. But kimchi has become the new darling of the global culinary world.
These days, it seems kimchi is everywhere. There's kimchi tacos, made famous by Roy Choi's food truck sensation back in 2008. Giada De Laurentiis cooked up a kimchi pancake on one of her Food Network shows. Whole Foods has dedicated an entire shelf to kimchi. There's kimchi-flavored tortilla chips, kimchi chocolate, even kimchi-flavored soda. Yes, kimchi is enjoying a boom lately. However, it is not just a passing fad. In Korea, kimchi is indisputably the national food with a long-standing history that goes all the way back to the 7th century when Koreans began experimenting with salting and fermentation to preserve food. I also wanted to learn how to make kimchi, so I asked In Suk-shin to teach me her technique.
So you buy the cabbage, and then what do you do in the first step?
반 잘라가지고.
She says cut the cabbage and put it into a salty water bath. Then take a spoonful of salt and sprinkle on each cabbage leaf until it wilts. Next, she makes a spicy mixture of
무하고
radish,
레디쉬하고 사과가 들어가고
apple,
마늘,
garlic,
진저, 파,
green onion,
그리고 아니언, 그리고 옥타포스, 슈림프, 고춧가루,
chili powder.
칠리 파우더.
The final ingredient is a dollop of starch to aid in fermentation. Shin favors cooked oatmeal. She then spreads the mixture on each leaf, wraps it up, and into the bottle it goes.
Last but not least, kimchi is good for you too, packed full of the probiotic strain lactobacilli, a bacteria also found in yogurt. Kimchi also has anti-aging and anti-cancer benefits, promoting brain, colon, and skin health. And best of all, kimchi can help you lose weight. So what are you waiting for? I'm Minnie Rowe for Asian American Life.
And if you're in the neighborhood, be sure to visit the Museum of Food and Drink to check out Chow making the Chinese American restaurant. And to learn more about all our stories, be sure to visit us on Facebook at Asian American Life. I'm your host, Ernabel Demillo. We'll see you next time.